BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast. Today, a 4-year study on 17 farms shows the profitability of farming for nature still lags behind intensive food production, despite the benefits for the environment.
Now, while it has a lot of benefits, that just wasn't enough to offset the fact that we're taking that land out of production in the context of those systems.
We'll have more on that in just a moment. First, though, today, one of the farmers seeking a judicial review of the government's decision to impose inheritance tax on farm businesses has told us why he's taking part in the group action. In the budget last October, the government decided to cap two policies, agricultural property relief, APR, and business property relief, BPR, which farms had been able to use to pass on their farmland and associated business assets tax-free. Under the new plans, there'll be a 20% inheritance tax on agricultural assets worth more than £1 million. Well, farmers claim the change will mean many won't be able to afford the tax bill and they'll have to sell up. The government argues 3/4 of estates will continue to pay no inheritance tax at all, while the remaining quarter will pay half the inheritance tax that most people pay, and payments can be spread over 10 years interest-free. Well, now a group of farmers is seeking a judicial review over what they say was the government's failure to consult properly on the decision. Tom Martin, who's known as Farmer Tom on social media, is one of that group.
I obviously believe it's not a great piece of legislation. It doesn't do what it set out to do. And in fact, it penalises a lot of hardworking family farms and other family businesses as well. But we are a parliamentary democracy and our government really, I feel, are duty bound to consult properly before they bring about any legislation, but particularly something that is so far reaching and has such deep impacts.
You're talking about the consultation which you believe was missing.
That's right, yeah. Well, it was only a very limited consultation. As a family business, I would have liked to have fed into that, and I would have liked to made the government aware of the impacts that it would have. And we're not alone. It's mirrored across the farming industry and it affects all family businesses as well.
And I know your dad is joining you in this action, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he longs to pass this family business on to the next generation. And whilst he perhaps wouldn't be around to see the negative impacts of this, he's put everything he has, blood, sweat, toil and tears, into this business. And so he's absolutely adamant that it's not broken up by a careless piece of legislation.
People would say, look, you have the 7-year rule where things can be passed on without that tax applying. You've got 10 years to pay the tax if you have to pay it. So there are some mitigations there, aren't there?
Well, of course, there are things that you can do. You can gift, and then if you're lucky enough to live 7 years, then there's no tax on that. However, of course, when you gift, if it's outside a partnership, you're immediately liable for 24% capital gains tax. So there are impacts no matter what we try to do. But really what I'm about is businesses want to be confident. They want to freely make decisions. They don't want to be constrained by legislation. They want to be inspired by legislation, really. And we've got the absolute opposite happening here.
How realistic is it, though, that you're actually going to make a difference here?
Now, this is not action to overturn the legislation. That would be great. But this is legislation to make sure the government have done their job, that they've consulted appropriately and that they've thought these things through.
If you win the case and you force them to consult better, that takes place, but the government still decides to go ahead with what it's already decided. Will that make any difference to you?
No, clearly if the legislation doesn't change in the end, but what we want them to do is to be consulting appropriately, and that's our chance to have our say. We haven't had that. Effectively, we've been muted, we've been put on mute during this process by a government who say that they're listening, say that they're on the side of family businesses. And it's very difficult to believe any of those things with a government who don't appear to have listened, don't appear to understand, and don't appear to be prepared to be flexible to achieve their goals. These are their stated goals. And so we need them to be consulting appropriately. It's very simple.
Farmer Tom Martin, we asked for a response from the Treasury. A spokesperson told us we do not comment on potential litigation matters. Regenerative farming used to be a niche term for a fairly niche way of farming, but now it's much more common, and it's not unusual to see big food companies saying that the farmers they work with are ticking many regenerative boxes. That is, reducing the carbon footprint, increasing on-farm biodiversity, and improving soil health. All week we're talking about regen farming. Well, one of those companies is the global giant Nestle. Now around 80 UK farmers who supply them are being paid a premium to farm regeneratively, and a huge data collection exercise is underway to measure the impact. The farmer-owned dairy cooperative First Milk sources milk from its members for the company and is running the regenerative milk plan alongside them. Kaz Graham reports from a field of dairy cows in North Cumbria.
We're just going to move the fence forward, so the cows are actually going to go onto a really clean break of grass. I think the cows know exactly what we're doing.
They're quite excited, aren't they? Where does the milk go?
It goes to Nestle in the Dalston factory, and it's used to create all the little sachets of Nescafe frothy coffee. So just line of sight, you can see the chimney at the back of the factory there.
So you can.
It's really close as you could get, as joined up as a local can be with a big corporate company.
I'm with Richard Henderson, who milks around 220 cows just outside Carlisle, and he is one of the 80 farmers taking part in the Nestle regenerative milk plan. One of the things that's changed since you became part of the project is the grass that these cows are so enthusiastically eating at the moment, isn't it?
There's a lot of white clover at the minute. It's doing really well. The legumes, the clovers, they're really high in protein. They can grow without any nitrogen, so they can capture nitrogen from the air.
So that means that you don't have to buy in as much fertiliser.
Yeah, so we don't have to.
So how, because of the plan, have you changed the way that you farm?
Probably understanding that ploughing everything wasn't necessary, keeping carbon within the soil profile. We're keeping a living root on the soil surface all year round, and we are learning more and more as we go along this journey.
Well, this project is a partnership between Nestle and the farmer dairy co-op First Milk, and Mark Brooking from First Milk is here too. Tell me what this partnership is for and how it works.
In essence, it's all about Nestle delivering on their sustainability goals. Firstly, is it's a resilience for the farmer. They need to actually be financially resilient, but then there's also the things that can be done on farm to reduce emissions, and then how we can actually enhance nature, and effectively, typically, that will be biodiversity, protecting water, and then also sequestering soil carbon.
This is an incredibly detailed study. Every single field of this farm and of the 80 farms that are taking part in this, they're being analysed to the nth degree in terms of all kinds of things. I think you've got some of the data, haven't you? Just here on your phone, we're looking at it now.
So that data is actually like we can then use it to calculate a score for each individual field. We can then monitor progress, and we've been able to demonstrate that the farms have been delivering actually increased biodiversity.
Richard, do you get a premium for that milk from Nestle because you're farming in this way?
Oh yeah, that's how it works for the farmer point of view, because the financial incentive generally covers most, if not all, of the costs of doing something just a little bit different.
But actually their businesses become more resilient, so they're growing more grass, they're actually lowering their costs, they're buying less fertiliser, less bought in feed as well. The farmers have access to the app, they can pick up all of this data.
Some people might say, these big global companies, they want to have regen farming on their labelling, don't they? Because it looks good. I mean, some people might say, it's just greenwashing, isn't it? How would you respond to that?
I mean, they're putting the money where their mouth is. Literally, it's millions of pounds being invested into farmers' pockets long term. And we see this happening more and more because they understand actually that the farmers have actually this massive asset in terms of nature and what they can do for sequestering carbon, but also who else can reverse biodiversity loss than actually farmers. Calling it regenerative farming, call it whatever you like as far as I'm concerned. What we want to do is deliver increased biodiversity, protect more water and sequester more carbon.
Mark Brooking from First Milk. Well, all those actions taken by the farmers we've just heard from are part of nature-friendly farming or agroecology. And a new study published today by the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology shows, it says for the first time, that this sort of farming is not currently as profitable as intensive food production. The peer-reviewed paper shows that agroecology improves biodiversity and can also boost crop yields, but the cost of creating habitats and the loss of some productive land means lower profits. Dr. Ben Woodcock led the 4-year study and is author of the report.
So in terms of profitability, what we're looking at really is yield. We focus very much on kind of a set of key crops, which were really kind of cereals, the winter and the spring cereals, and oilseed rapes. So some of our farms did grow other things, but we've really focused on what we consider to be the kind of critical crops in terms of kind of bottom line for a lot of farmers.
How did agroecological farms lose out? What were they doing that cost them?
The study aimed to look at that relationship, the immediate benefits of that agroecological farming towards biodiversity, how that impacted those critical aspects of biodiversity like pest control, kind of soil health, pollinators, these different things, but then the knock-on effects that had onto yield. Now, consistently, we found that across those 17 farms, there was this benefit on yield. We found this increase across those oilseed rape crops, those cereals that increased that. The reality is, though, is that these management systems, they take time, they take effort, and they take land to implement. Now, particularly in our more advanced management systems, these included things like infield strips and also the addition of organic matter, farmyard manure. Now, infield strips under the Sustainable Farming Incentive, at least up till now, have received payments associated with them. But obviously, this is taking productive land out of farming. Now, while it has a lot of benefits in terms of increasing the yield, that increase in yield just wasn't enough to offset the fact that we're taking that land out of production in the context of those systems.
Your report says that more government subsidies would be needed to make up that shortfall in profitability. But government payments to farmers are falling rapidly. So that's not going to happen, is it?
To be clear, we looked at different management systems. We had what I would describe as a kind of middle of the ground one, where it's focusing more on enhancing beneficial invertebrates within the crops, and that really had field margins and cover crops. And then we had a more all singing, all dancing one that had field margins, cover crops, infield strips, organic matter. Now, that middle one, the field margins and cover crops, that was profitable, or at least it broke even relative to the business as usual, the kind of conventional management system, as long as the subsidies were present. It was the more extreme cases where you start moving to get to a kind of a higher level of benefiting those kind of underlying ecosystem processes, that pollination, pest control, soil health, that there comes a cost associated with that. And what we found is that relative to the subsidies that are available at the moment, that wouldn't be enough to make that profitable relative to the kind of conventional management system. There is a need for subsidies to support farmers to transition towards these more sustainable farming systems. They have longer term benefits beyond just the 4 years that we specifically looked at.
But won't this evidence put off farmers from taking up ecologically friendly farming methods if they can see that it's going to lose them money, basically?
What I would say is that there's a lot of variation around what we looked at. Now, obviously, we looked at 17 farms, and some farms it does extremely well. Sometimes it does less well. And a lot of that difference comes down to the way that individual farms are able to establish a lot of these agroecological management practices. Where they establish particularly well, stuff like field margins, infield strips, cover crops, all these different options, there are potentially real benefits where the profitability becomes much, much better. If you're looking to future-proof your farming system, if you're aware of the fact that going into the future, you're likely to lose plant protection products, kind of pesticides, insecticides, these kind of different things, there is a need to think about the long-term sustainability of the farming system.
Dr. Ben Woodcock from the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. That's all from us. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Rebecca Rooney. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.